Well, I think his criticism at the time was just the sheer size of it, but it did provide funding for the military, which he wanted.
It did.
And that's why he winced, but he signed it. This one just seemed to catch him off guard. I don't think he anticipated this end, but what does he do now?
Well, I think that what he's doing is putting it back on Congress's plate, but also taking Democrats at their word. You know, the one thing that is not being covered here this morning, Neil, is that the fact that the President of the United States said, okay, Democrats, I'm going to take you at your word. I'm going to trust that you're really willing to negotiate. You got 3 weeks to get it done. And if not, we're going to be back in the same situation. But I think
what does same situation mean, sir? Does that mean he does declare national emergency, or would he risk shutting down the government again? What?
Well, I think there's always a risk of shutting it down, although I don't think that that's the highest risk at this particular point. I know you made that point yesterday, Neil. I think that he has, in fact, I know he has 3 or 4 different options that are at his disposal, that are legal, some that are in statute already. Listen, if President Obama can send $1.8 billion to the Iranians, I can tell you I didn't appropriate that. Certainly finding a few $billions for border security on our southern border is something that this president can do legally and without a challenge.
All right. Well, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution does give him some wide moves here. He could require the federal government to protect states that might be in danger of an invasion from these caravans. But that would likely, from what legal analysts tell me, that would likely be struck down by a court, and we'd be back to where we are. Do you anticipate that?
So I don't anticipate necessarily that one being used. So let's look at 10 U.S.C. sections 274 and 284. And to your viewers,
I'm so glad you brought those up. Yeah, what the heck?
It means absolutely nothing. But here's what it does mean. It says that DOD can help protect our borders for those drug corridors, build fencing, build walls, provide lighting.
So you can allocate money. That's the defense about allocate money appropriate in other areas and ship them to these areas. And many tell me that you can't do that. Nancy Pelosi is already on record, said don't even try that.
Well, but the Supreme Courts are on the executive branch's side of this because they have what they call Chevron deference that said if it's ambiguous, the executive branch gets to interpret it. So, you know, the last time I checked, Nancy Pelosi is not a Supreme Court justice. And if we're going to have the fight, let's do it. But I think that where we really need to be is make Congress do their job over the next 3 weeks. We're going to take the Democrats at their word that they said, open it up, we'll negotiate in good faith. We'll see very quickly.
All right, so just so I understand, when the Democrats, as part of their word, did that include the possibility of including in the debate funding for a wall? I've heard from some Democrats who say that was never talked about. Was it?
Yeah, so I think that where we are, Neil, on this particular thing, if you're using the word wall and a concrete barrier, I don't think most Democrats will support that. If you're looking at strategic fencing and barriers and border barriers, similar to what Steny Hoyer just said, hopefully what you'll hear from Mr. Kildee coming up here in just a minute, I think most Democrats see that there are areas of our border that have no fencing, no barriers, and you can just walk across. And that doesn't mean just walking across for a stroll. It means drugs and human trafficking and all the bad things that can happen. And so hopefully we'll see that. I can tell you, I've had very good conversations with a lot of my Democrat colleagues in private. I'm optimistic that we can get there.
All right, we'll see.